Welcome everybody to the channel. This is the video about human interface guidelines for iOS by Apple. You can find the human interface guidelines on appledeveloper.apple.com/design/human interface guidelines iOS overview themes, or you can just go to Google and search for iOS human interface guidelines, and it will take you directly to the page where you have a landing page for different guidelines for Mac OS, Watch OS, TV OS. What we are going to talk about in the series of these videos is iOS human guidelines. So let's get started. As you can see, I have a reminders app on the right side and the human interface guidelines on the left side. So what we are going to talk about in these videos is how those human interface guidelines are actually implemented in the apps. We will do some implementations along the line when we go from top to bottom on these guidelines, but from today's video we are just gonna look at the themes. So what themes talks about, what are these different design principles and how Apple use them in their apps before we jump into building our own app. I would really suggest every developer who is developing for Apple platforms should go through all these guidelines. So what we are going to do is we're going to go through themes today now. So what does themes means? So iOS design themes means it's the whole app experience that you build and how it should work according to the human interface guidelines. So the theme means what's the overall subject matter of your app that you're trying to build, and it talks about three things: clarity, deference, and depth. So what's clarity? So clarity is all the text that you put on your app should be legible. If you see on the right side on the reminders app, you can clearly see and read all the text that's there. The icons should be subtle and should be inner size, which is not too small, not too big. And I'm taking an example of the reminders app here. All the icons are perfect size and they are different colors so that they catch the eyes depending upon what you are looking for. Like flags is marked with a orange background so that you can see it's a flagged item which I need to now action on immediately. All items are gray, those are not primary action items. So it's list of all the items. So make sure that you use your colors in your app properly. There should not be too much space, or it should not be too much going on in the view that distract user attention from the primary content. So that brings us to deference. So deference is actually talks about how you should lay out your primary content. So when we talk about the primary content, that's the content area of your screen where you add your main content. So minimum use of bezels, don't use gradients. See how this reminders app, it's subtle. It says on background, there's no, like if I have to put a weird gradient here, it will take my eyes off the main content. So here it's bringing up the main content to my focus. So I know, okay, these are the groups of my lists and this is my list which I have created. I can navigate to these lists and then can go back. So when talking about the navigation, that's bring us to the depth. So depth part is where you are in your app at any stage. So let's talk about if I'm going to tests. So you see when the transition happened and when I'm using the app, I know if I have to go back, I can use the swipe feature to go back. Now let's say if I'm going to add a reminder, so that's a sheet, so I can drag and I'm back. So I am in context of my main content all the time. So all my transition and navigation happened, but I am still in context where I am in the app. So let's talk about the design principle. So first one is aesthetic integrity. So what that means, so your app, if you're building an app for a serious task, for a hospital, or in an organization or an education, you don't want the app to be more distracting, so you should use subtle colors and predictable behavior. On the other hand, if you're building a game, you can put a lot of graphics, make it more enthusiastic for the user, more entertaining, and encouraging the discovery of the app. So put a lot of buttons and menus there. So that brings us to the consistency part. The consistency part is, if you are building an apps for iOS, they should be consistent with how the iOS how people expect iOS app to behave. For example, if we look at the apps built by Apple, so we see a behavior like all the search bar are on the top, right? Messages, and then if I go contacts, the search bar is there on the top, right? So that's consistency. So all the iOS user knows where the search bars are usually, so you don't have to do weird design thinking about where you put your search. Everybody knows for iOS app, search is on the top and that's where it is. Sometimes Apple hides the search bar, but again, people know that if you drag down and it will show up the search bar. So next one is direct manipulation. What does that mean? So direct manipulation is, if I am, let's say I am in Safari and I'm reading a content, but I want to use a horizontal mode. As soon as I move my phone horizontally, it's gonna switch. So that's the direct manipulation of the content using, like if I change my screen rotation. So feedback comes to letting user know that there is some kind of action happening in the background. Like if I am loading something on my screen, I would probably show a small loading indicator telling, okay, yes, we are loading the data. Another part of the feedback is, if you hold on test, it's gonna give a haptic feedback to the user. Okay, there's some action happened. So those are part of the feedback process that you can implement in your app. Metaphors are your real life actions. You bring your real life actions into the apps, like we swipe and then we toggle stuff. So how, like, we have this list, right? Nobody has mentioned what we can do with this test list action, but if I swipe, which is a action and which we know on iOS controls works when we swipe on them, and then it will show me additional methods here. Now if I go tap, it's going to navigate, so that's another action. So if I go here, I have some test reminders. Now I tap, I know that tapping that toggle, it's going to turn it on, and then I can close this guy, go back. So this brings us to the next section, which is user control. Always think of your apps should not be dictating the actions. It's people who should be taking the actions based on the actions. It's the people who should be taking the actions, not your app. Should not be assuming that, oh, okay, now if user has done this, we should be doing this. You should not do. Always make sure the actions are performed by the user. So what do we mean when we say the actions should be performed by the user? Let's say I'm here, and if I change something here, and if I say cancel, it's gonna show me an action, whether should I discard my changes or do you want to stay here. So that's asking the user, do you want to discard or you want to cancel? other things that I have seen people doing is when we have a pickers, so we'll go to the picker, right? What they would do is as soon as they select the picker, they move the user, navigate the user automatically back to the previous screen, which is, I believe, is not the right behavior. Maybe they are in a meeting or they are in a group discussion where they are discussing, okay, what priority this task should be low, medium, and if we keep moving them back and forth, that's not a good user experience. So always adhere to the guidelines and follow them, and always let the user decide when they want to make a specific action. So that brings us to the end of the video, where we went through the iOS theme sections, where it talks about the overall theme of the app, what are the three primary theme principles that we have, which is clarity, deference, and depth, and what are the design principles we need to follow in our apps when we are trying to build them or when we are as a designer designing them. So aesthetic integrity, consistency, direct manipulation, feedback, metaphors, and user controls. In the next video, we'll talk about the interface essentials. Goodbye. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.